Right, welcome back, grade 12s. So, what is the implications for 2030, which is around the corner for us? That is 9 years from now, excluding this year, but it's around the corner. South African citizens are beyond battle weary as their day-to-day realities continue to be marred by social incidents and multi-layered structural inequalities, of which the triple challenge, unemployment, poverty, and inequality, continue unabated. Others, however, continue to hope in yesteryear's fleeting promises of economic freedom, land ownership, and prosperity. Present political instability on the African continent and unprecedented water and food insecurity in South Africa not only adds to the vulnerability but fundamentally reconfigured the scope, nature, and extent of the in-provincial and cross-border migration into the country. The government's continued failure to address the demand of commercial sex and forced labor, and the concomitant shrinking universe of choices faced by ordinary South African citizens have seen criminal networks increasingly exploiting the economic principles of supply and demand. The commodification of trade in human beings have become a critical threat to human and national security, and its crippling effect on South Africa's rule of law, democratic aspirations, and the socio-economic well-being of its people have come to fruition. So this is speaking of a apocalyptic future, that everything has erupted and thus is taking over our society. Okay, so shortfalls on the multidisciplinary response to human trafficking over the past 2 decades now reveals itself in a catapulting dark number of victims whose lived experiences and harm compounds the overall level of harm to all spheres of society. Right, so here they're speaking of the different elements as well: drug abuse, complex trauma, HIV, suicide, all of these sort of emerging from all of this, and the lack of comprehensive criminal justice response continually to fuel impunity and serve as positive feedback for global criminal networks. So again, what he's speaking of is somewhat perplexed and saddened realities that we deal with. That recent case with SAPS, the South African Police Services, where they were hacked. And again, this is stuff that they are talking about. And they are unable to comprehend the extent of criminal injustice. And one of the things the SAPS commissioner spoke of was that he said they did not expect people that were to protect the law to have a hand in hampering it. So my question is, you have to, when you are dealing with like even in the bank, when you're dealing with the bank, you have to expect the worst of people. I know it's the worst thing, but you do that to protect your customers. And if they are so, aware of it in terms of the bank and customer relations, right? Why is it not done so for our personal protection? Because they're not getting out of it in terms of pay, like with a customer. Why does it seem to fall short when I am now no longer a customer but a citizen, and I need to be protected? You need to look at all variables. We as people should expect the best from our government. We shouldn't expect the most adequate that they can give us. That's not how it should be. They need to be better. And we as citizens have to enforce that they are better and are doing better for us, because this is our home. And we need to make sure that it is in order. Okay. So moving on from that, he speaks of transparency has been traded for translucency in issues related to governance and supply chains, with society's trust deficit in the South African project now at an all-time low. And again, we see that happening currently, that we do not trust our government systems. And we have these disillusioned masses that increasingly turn to xenophobia and public violence in a desperate attempt to ventilate frustrations, right? So this leads into xenophobia as well, in that we are fighting for against human trafficking, and a lot of it has a large pool in international waters. So any immigrant or international person coming into the country, we would see as a threat. Okay, so we call them these disillusioned masses that are prejudiced and will believe every person is out to ultimately exploit and manipulate us, and that's not always the case. So carries on to explain the different sort of effects that these disillusioned masses and the foreign sort of use of human trafficking would then lead to. Okay, so moving on towards a disruption of current trends. Ideologically slanted, oversimplistic, and reductionist explanations of who, what, when, where, why, and how of human trafficking must be set aside. So when unpacking it, we have this different ways of seeing it, a different idea of seeing human trafficking. It's been oversimplified. It's really reduced to its base form and hasn't been looked at all the different ways in which people can be abused and manipulated. Okay, so it is again multi-layered and a multifaceted phenomenon, must be nurtured, where the crime is understood as an emergent property of South Africa's structural inequalities, ambition-driven social insistence, greed, power. So all of these things, right, constitutes human trafficking and what leads to it. It's not this oversimplified idea that if I am out late at night or if I'm in an unsafe space, they're going to kidnap me. No, sometimes it's a bit more organized than that, in which people will organize that they want, let's say, 10 children, and they want 10 children of this color, of this body type, of this and whatever. Okay, let's say their customers on their site has given them descriptions of which children they would want, so they would organize it. So sometimes it's not always about yes, being safe will protect you. Yes, don't ever doubt that, it will. But sometimes they will make a plan to find you. And you need to know that you will be safe under the law, right? You will be sort of found within a certain reasonable time. You can count on your law enforcement, right? That's what we want. Even though we don't see it, but that's what we want. And that's what, as citizens, we should fight for. And research like this allows us to have knowledge. And knowledge is power. With that power, we can do so much. By teaching other people about it. And having the masses have one shared ideology. Keeping us together through it. Right? So then it goes into the criminal justice system, which is what I explained. And the government's response to all of this as well. Individual organizations that could also be started in communities to help it. Educational systems such as this project is part of this, right? And getting us to sort of go forward more knowledgeable. Partnerships between public and private. Different companies can get involved. Right. So I just want to go through his concluding remarks. So you can speak about all these different things, and again, you'll have this document to look at your leisure. Concluding remarks, he says, when confronting complex social ills in a complex and pluralistic society, a range of opposing views are bound to be evoked. Human trafficking in particular represents such a phenomenon which has garnered a variety of interpretations, many of them conflicting. These include human trafficking as slavery, legal migration, and so on and so forth. So opposing views and ideas are an inseparable part of human trafficking. Okay? And what he says, what they include, right? And so what he is saying is that finally, in the effort to cultivate collective compassion and local cohesion, the words of Martin Luther King Jr. is worth contemplating. In a real sense of all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. Right? A luta continua. The struggle continues. So what he is saying is that even though we feel like this doesn't impact us, other people's experiences, other people's things inadvertently will affect us, right? And you can look at the different ways in which that narrative fits into your own understanding. Okay, and then this is just to go over the references on generally how references are done in a bibliography. I just want to go through the first one. You would have the authors labeled here and the year that something was taken from. Then you would have the name of it, and in cases of a book you'd have the publisher. In cases of a website you would have the website, and then when it is accessed on, right? When you access it on. Now the date of, you might find this in some research, but as per I think it was 2018, not sure on the year, but it was no longer, I think after 2018, but it was no longer required for you to add in this date of access. So you might find articles from 2018 and older have the access date. That's the date this author googled this research. You don't have to have this anymore. Okay, so you don't add in the date accessed. You just add in name of the people, year, name of the article, website, or publisher. Okay, and that should conclude our videos. You're welcome to ask me any questions that you sort of have. I will try and answer it as timelessly as I possibly can. Okay, well, good luck with your research, and I really look forward to hearing the exciting stuff you have to offer.